I was the deadliest assassin of Nova Empire, a shadow born from the ashes of my fallen kingdom. To the world, I am Bianca, Prince Alexander's lethal sword. But beneath my mask hide the scars of a princess and the secret brand of a slave. When he pinned me down and whispered my forbidden name, I realized the hunter had been the prey all along. Is he my savior, or the most dangerous player in this game? Princess Aurelia. A name I had almost forgotten myself. It should have vanished 5 years ago, along with the fall of the Jade Empire. My greatest regret was taking part in the Sola Empire's grand hunt for nobles that year, and winning first prize. I became famous overnight. Princess Aurelia of the Jade Empire was renowned throughout the lands for her beauty. And so, the Emperor of the Nova Empire, the most powerful of the 4 empires, sent an edict demanding me as his concubine. The Nova Emperor was notorious for his cruelty and perversion. The edict was filled with unreasonable, crude demands, showing no respect for the Jade Empire's royal family. He said he wanted me as his concubine, but it was clear he just saw me as a rare trinket to possess. My father, the Emperor, trembled with rage as he held the edict. He slammed it in the Nova ambassador's face, kicked him out of the hall, and told him to go back and tell the Nova Emperor to keep dreaming. But we had all gravely underestimated the Nova Emperor's ambition and madness. A month later, he unleashed the Nova Empire's grand army and bathed the Jade Empire in blood. Covered in blood, I was tied to the city wall. I could only watch helplessly as my father, my mother, and all those innocent people were slaughtered one by one before my very eyes. Everything happened so fast, like a terrible nightmare. One moment, I was the princess of the Jade Empire, praised for my beauty and my skill in both scholarly and martial pursuits. The next, I was watching my country fall and my family die, surrounded by a sea of corpses. I was powerless, filled with nothing but rage and hatred. To humiliate me, the Nova Emperor ordered that I be kept alive. But he had me branded with the shameful mark of a slave and marched under guard back to the Nova Empire. On the way to exile, the small squad escorting me was ambushed by a group of desperate mountain bandits. Perhaps fate had decided to give me a chance. The bandits, greedy for riches, drew their broadswords and attacked the soldiers. In the chaos, I found my chance and managed to escape. To cover my tracks, I swapped clothes and accessories with a dead woman whose face was mangled beyond recognition, disguising myself as a peasant girl. I couldn't relax for a moment. I fled for my life into the mountains, but soon lost my way. Just as I was beginning to panic, something even more terrifying happened. I heard a wolf's howl, not just one, but a chorus of howls, rising and falling. I held my breath, a terrible dread creeping over me. Sure enough, moments later, I was surrounded by a wolf pack. After a desperate fight for my life, I was at my limit. As skilled as I was no match for an entire pack of hungry wolves. They stared at me with predatory hunger, their eyes glowing green in the dark. To them, I was just meat for the taking, with no chance of escape. But I wouldn't accept it. I refused to die like this. I had to kill that dog of a Nova Emperor with my own hands before I died. I refused to wait for death. I picked up a sharp branch from the ground and charged the alpha wolf. If I could just take it down, I might have a chance to carve out a path to safety. Ignoring the pain of teeth tearing at me from all sides, I plunged the branch deep into the alpha's neck. It howled in agony but did not die. And that was when I met him. With a single arrow, he ended the alpha wolf's life. Then he ordered his men to set fires and drive the rest of the pack away. On the brink of death, I saw a lavishly dressed man step down from his carriage. There, in the desolate wilderness, I lay covered in blood and grime, and he approached like a god descended from the heavens. He untied his own fur cloak, draped it over me, and swept me into his arms. I recognized him. It was Prince Alexander of the Nova Empire, a man whose power was second only to the Emperor himself. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in a heavily guarded courtyard while someone tended to my wounds. I had been changed into clean clothes at some point, the blood washed away, and I was instantly on high alert. I had met Prince Alexander once before. It was at that grand hunt I had defeated him in the final round to claim first prize. His wickedly handsome face was hard to forget. Although I was caked in blood and grime when he saved me from the wolves, I was still terrified he would recognize me. I subconsciously touched my face. A servant at my side saw the gesture and, assuming I was worried about my appearance, spoke with a hint of pity. "Miss, when the prince brought you back, your face was already badly injured. It's—" She trailed off, afraid to upset me, but I could already feel the scars that now crisscrossed my skin. I rushed to a mirror. Looking at my reflection, I breathed a sigh of relief, though I didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. I was happy because my face was ruined. The face in the mirror belonged to a stranger, so I no longer had to worry about being recognized. But I was also sad because the scarred visage was indeed hideous. Just then, I heard a maid at the door call out respectfully, "My prince." Then, through the mirror, I saw a man of immense grace appear, standing casually behind me. He was the very picture of elegance, a man without equal. A faint, unreadable smile played on his lips as he watched me in silence. I grew nervous, my mind racing. Why was he in the mountains? How could I explain who I was? But I never expected his first words. He teased, "Are you planning to keep your back to me forever?" The countless stories I had rehearsed in my head were shattered by his simple question. For a moment, I was stunned. In my panic, I actually obeyed and turned around. "Good girl," he chuckled, patting my head with a gentle, disarming air. Even back in the Jade Empire, I had heard that this Prince Alexander was a man of formidable means. His mother had died young, yet he had navigated the treacherous palace intrigues, growing from a helpless young prince into the powerful man he was today. Rumor had it the current Nova Emperor would never have taken the throne if not for the powerful backing of his mother's clan. Now, the Emperor was wary of Prince Alexander, but powerless against him, able to resort only to petty tricks behind his back. A man like this possessed a mind and cunning far beyond my own. He led me to a seat, poured me a cup of tea, and asked casually, "Given your extraordinary skills, might I ask your name, and why you were so deep in the mountain woods?" Of course. The pleasantries were over. It was time to get to the point. I forced tears to my eyes and put on a sorrowful expression. "I have no name. My father was a hunter in these mountains, so I grew up a bit rough and learned some martial arts." I risked a glance at Prince Alexander. He was resting his head on his hand, leaning on the table, and listening intently. I steeled myself and continued my fabricated story. Disaster struck my home. My father was killed by bandits, and my mother died fighting to protect me. I barely escaped, only to be surrounded by wolves. I am eternally grateful that you saved me, my prince. At this, Prince Alexander's eyes seemed to brighten. He asked with great interest, "Oh, then how do you plan to repay me for saving your life?" I froze. This man didn't follow any script. That wasn't supposed to be the point. I will do whatever you command." At this point, as long as he didn't recognize me, anything was negotiable. Prince Alexander's captivating eyes narrowed, their clear depths studying me without a word. Just as I was about to panic, certain I had slipped up, he broke into a smile as warm as a spring breeze. "In that case, from now on, you will stay by my side and be my sword." From that day on, Prince Alexander had me secretly trained in martial arts, focusing on concealment and the art of assassination. He wanted me to be his sword, an assassin trained to one day lead his shadow organization. He also gave me a new name, Bianca. I accepted this new identity. In the Nova Empire, I was weak and alone. On my own, I had no way of getting close to the Emperor, let alone killing him. Although my disfigured face made me all but unrecognizable, it was far safer to hide by Prince Alexander's side than to wander on my own. A shadow assassin, operating from the darkness, the role couldn't have been more fitting. As an ambitious man, Prince Alexander was surely building his shadow organization to one day seize the throne. If I could take control of the shadows, I would still have a sliver of hope for revenge. I asked the prince, "Why did you choose me?" Prince Alexander tilted my chin up. His tone was half joking, half serious, making it impossible to tell what he truly meant. "Because the first time I saw you, I was delighted." The first time? When he found me among the wolves, I was covered in blood and in a wretched state. I couldn't imagine what there was to be delighted about. I pushed the thought aside, assuming he was just teasing me, but he simply squinted and grinned, a triumphant look on his face. Then he swept me into his arms and sat me on his lap. "B," he murmured, "did you know? You and I are the same. were both natural-born predators of the night. His face was so close as he spoke that I could feel his warm breath on my skin. I didn't understand what he meant at all, but my face, quite shamelessly, turned red. And though I was loath to admit it, my heart had skipped a beat that day he saved me from the wolves, wrapped me in his fur cloak, and held me in his arms. No man had ever been so gentle with me. Besides, his embrace was so warm. Prince Alexander was usually busy, but he always found time to check on my homework. Every time he came, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement and nerves. I was terrified he would be disappointed in my progress, so I always gave it my all. I didn't even realize it myself, but I was acting like a child desperate for a teacher's praise. In the end, I did not disappoint him. In less than a year, I became his most formidable assassin and took charge of the shadows. My days were spent clad in black, my face hidden behind a mask, moving without a trace. Everyone else in the organization respected and feared me. To command a group of highly skilled male assassins, I'd had to resort to harsh methods, but they would never have dreamed that I, their ruthless she-devil, would sneak into the darkened corners of a brothel when no one was watching, just to spy on Prince Alexander. I admit it was rather pathetic and foolish. But who could blame me when Prince Alexander was so captivating? He knew full well how handsome he was, and yet he still frequented a den of iniquity like this brothel. I couldn't help but feel indignant. I silently moved closer to the most luxurious room in the brothel. I watched as he was surrounded by beautiful women, each one draped over him, vying for his attention. He neither pushed them away nor responded, simply sipping his wine with a smile in his eyes. For no reason at all, a pang of bitterness washed over me. I touched the mask on my face and thought with a self-deprecating laugh, "What am I doing? I'm no longer the lofty Princess Aurelia." A disfigured assassin has no business entertaining such foolish thoughts. Just as I was thinking this, I heard Prince Alexander's deep, magnetic voice. "All of you, leave. I'm a bit tired." In an instant, all the beautiful courtesans left the room, leaving Prince Alexander to drink alone. He didn't look up, but his words were clearly directed at my hiding spot. "Come out." I was so surprised and ashamed that I wished the ground would swallow me whole. My skills in concealment were unmatched. When had he discovered me? Defeated, I forced myself to remain calm, revealed myself, and walked over to him. "Greetings, Prince Alexander." Prince Alexander still had that lazy, languid air about him. He leaned back on the magnificent couch, a teasing smile on his face as he watched me. It seemed he had known I was there all along. I deeply regretted my decision to come here tonight. Seeing the questioning look in his eyes, I clenched my teeth and made up an excuse that even I didn't believe. "My right eyelid has been twitching all day. I had a premonition that you might be in danger, so I found your location and came to protect you, just in case." After spouting this nonsense with a straight face, I looked at him, my eyes filled with sincerity. The prince couldn't hold back a laugh. "Well said." He leaned closer, his eyes twinkling with affection and amusement. "With my Bia to protect me, I feel perfectly safe." After saying that, he took off my mask and gently pecked my right eyelid. I was so startled I stumbled backward. I didn't have to look to know my face was bright red. Prince Alexander must have done it on purpose. He knew I was spying on him, yet he said nothing, playing along with my fabricated story just to tease me. Now he'd even taken my mask, leaving my flushed face completely exposed for him to see. Bia? The very person who had made me so mortified was calling my name, but I just kept my head down, wishing I could dig a hole and bury myself alive. Prince Alexander looked at me with amusement. "Bia," he said softly, "you don't need to worry about my safety. What you saw just now was merely an act for the spies my brother, the Emperor, sent." "Huh? Spies?" I glanced around warily, but Prince Alexander seemed to guess my thoughts. "It's all right, the spies have already left." I breathed a sigh of relief, but then I realized he didn't have to explain any of this to me. Could it be he was worried I would misunderstand? I looked at Prince Alexander. His clear eyes seemed to hold a bottomless vortex, one I couldn't fathom, yet I found myself irresistibly drawn in. Well, if that was the case, I didn't mind at all. For 5 years, I had never failed a mission. Not until Prince Alexander ordered me to move against the Grand Marshal's estate. The Grand Marshal, secure in his status as the Emperor's confidant, not only slandered loyal officials in the palace, but also oppressed the common people, committing all manner of evil. Recently, his depravity had worsened. He had taken to capturing innocent people and locking them in his estate, torturing them to death for his own amusement. Prince Alexander ordered me to infiltrate the Grand Marshal's estate, assassinate the Grand Marshal, and rescue the captives. The mission should have been simple enough. With intelligence from an informant inside the estate, I quickly managed to free the captives and deliver a fatal blow to the Grand Marshal. But I never expected the intelligence to be wrong. The Grand Marshal's estate was secretly harboring a group of elite warriors from the western regions. Before he died, the Grand Marshal activated a mechanism, releasing these warriors and ordering them to tear me to pieces. These men had been raised on special concoctions from birth, giving them inhuman physiques and an inability to feel pain. Ordinary attacks had no effect on them. The commotion drew the attention of the estate guards, and the situation quickly spiraled out of my control. I fought with everything I had and managed to escape, though I was severely wounded. I pushed on for several miles, but I soon realized my ribs and leg were nearly shattered. Wounds on my shoulder and back were deep enough to expose bone. With injuries this severe, there was no way I could make it back to the prince's estate. I used a smoke signal to inform Prince Alexander that the mission was complete, but that something had gone wrong and I couldn't return. Then I took cover in a nearby abandoned house. Lying on a straw mat, every breath was excruciating. An overwhelming wave of drowsiness washed over me, and I couldn't fight off unconsciousness. Just as my eyes were about to close, a familiar figure rushed in and swept me into his arms. I heard him desperately calling my name. It was Prince Alexander. I wanted to answer, but I couldn't move. While unconscious, I had a very long dream. I dreamt I was on a battlefield, surrounded by the glint of swords and piles of bodies. But someone was holding my hand tightly, pulling me along as he ran. He was in front of me, shielding me from all the blades, but he showed no sign of stopping. I didn't know where he was going, and I couldn't see his face. I only knew that his palm was so warm. Even though we were surrounded by a scene of carnage, the sight of his back gave me a strange sense of familiarity and peace. As I thought this, I couldn't help but squeeze his hand tighter. "Bianca! Bianca!" A deep voice suddenly sounded in my ear, and I bolted awake. I opened my eyes to find myself on an unfamiliar bed. Beside it, Prince Alexander was looking at me with an amused expression. I was clutching his hand in an iron grip. I had no idea where I found the strength, injured as I was. To make matters worse, he asked, "What sweet dream were you having? I haven't seen you smile so happily in a long time." Hearing that, I nearly fainted again. I had actually mistaken Prince Alexander for the man in my dream, held his hand for dear life, and even smiled like that in front of him. At that moment, I was so embarrassed, I could have died. A renowned assassin having a girlish dream about being rescued by a hero. I would die before I told Prince Alexander. As I was trying to figure out how to change the subject, Prince Alexander suddenly leaned closer. He was wearing a loose, simple robe, and as he leaned over, his collar opened slightly. I held my breath, afraid to move. However, he only carefully tucked me in. His movements so gentle it was as if he was afraid of hurting me. He paused, then said softly, "No matter what, seeing you smile makes me..." For some reason, there was a hint of sadness in his tone. Once my embarrassment subsided, the piercing pain from my shattered bones hit me all at once. I clenched my teeth, refusing to cry out, but he noticed the change in my expression immediately. He ordered a maid to bring more pain-relieving powder, and he stayed by my side, taking care of me for a full day and night. I learned from the maids that this was Prince Alexander's bedchamber. After he brought me back unconscious, he had placed me here and moved into the study himself. I was stunned. It was common knowledge in the prince's estate that he had never allowed any woman into his bedchamber. The more I thought about it, the more improper it felt. I was worried he would become the subject of gossip. Prince Alexander saw my concern and reassured me. "Just focus on resting. You don't need to worry about anything else." The doctor said my injuries were so severe that I would have to stay in bed for 2 or 3 months. But the prince's plans had been in motion for years. The arrow was already drawn. There was no turning back, and there was still so much to be done. Although I was anxious, the prince strictly forbade me from moving, so there was nothing I could do. Since my injury, the prince had become noticeably busier. He would often return to the estate late at night, but if I was still awake, he would almost always come to see me first. Sometimes, he would personally feed me my medicine. Other times, he would sing me lullabies to help me sleep. The tunes were ones I had never heard before. They didn't sound like the courtly songs favored by nobles, but more like folk lullabies. I couldn't help but wonder, how did a prince who grew up in the palace know how to sing these? One day, the prince was summoned to the palace. The servants said that when he returned, his face was unusually grim. He went straight to his study and shut himself inside for a long time. I was worried, but I didn't know what to do. With my injuries, all I could do was toss and turn in my room all night, consumed by anxiety. Early the next morning, just as I was debating whether to sneak over to the study, the prince arrived. He still smiled gently when he saw me, but I could clearly smell the alcohol on his breath. I could also sense the immense effort it took for him to suppress his emotions. He had been drinking all night. Ever since I had known him, he had always maintained a calm, detached demeanor, no matter the circumstances. I had never seen him struggle so openly with his feelings. He stroked my hair as usual and asked, "Are you feeling any better today?" He asked me this every day, and though his tone was as gentle as always, for the first time, I couldn't stop myself from shouting, "Can't you take care of yourself first?" Prince Alexander froze, his hand still on my head, clearly not expecting my sudden outburst. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. I hadn't meant to get angry, my heart just ached for him. He was clearly miserable. Though I didn't know why, I would rather see him lash out in anger than force a smile like this. Seeing him like this hurt more than being cut with a knife. "I'm sorry." I knelt before the prince to apologize. No matter what, I had no right to be so insolent. But the prince merely chuckled softly and helped me up. He pretended to be displeased, pinching my ear lightly, but his tone was a little brighter. My, our Bea has grown up, she even dares to get angry with me now." With that, he picked me up, placed me back on the bed, and told me to lie down and rest. I tugged on his sleeve, hesitated, and finally stammered, "My prince, I don't want to see you suffer." A glint appeared in his eyes. He patted my hand and said with clear satisfaction, "Silly Bea, so you finally know how to worry about your prince." "My heart has always been with you," I replied silently. "You just don't know it." Prince Alexander sighed, his voice suddenly heavy. "Yesterday was the anniversary of my mother's death." I was shocked. I had been by his side for years, but I had never heard him mention his mother, let alone the anniversary of her death. Few people know about this, because every year on this day, I remember the cowardly, timid boy I was, who clung to life at all costs. For all these years, I've deliberately avoided this day and never paid my respects. He looked at me, his eyes filled with sorrow and desolation. I was 5 years old then. I watched as the most powerful woman in the harem forced my mother to drink poison. But even as she was dying, she stared at me and said, "You must live on, no matter what." I have never forgotten those words. My mother was a commoner with no power or influence. After she died, I went along with that woman's lie that my mother had died of an illness. I survived by fawning over the very woman who had killed her. As Prince Alexander recounted the palace secrets of the past with a self-mocking tone, I could only imagine how cruel the reality must have been. He made it sound simple, but the truth was unimaginably difficult. A 5-year-old boy with no one to rely on, forced to witness his mother's murder, and then treat her killer as a surrogate mother, all while climbing his way up through schemes and bloodshed. Some things that had puzzled me in the past were now clear. Like why a prince who grew up in the palace knew folk lullabies, and why he was so determined to seize the throne. Yesterday, the emperor or the empress dowager must have summoned him to court, brought up the past, and used it to humiliate him. At this thought, seeing the dimness in Prince Alexander's eyes and the self-mocking smile on his lips, I don't know where I found the courage, but I leaned forward and kissed him. "My prince," I said, "you did nothing wrong. the fault is theirs and theirs alone.